Now, of course, there are no hints within the show because it ended with Trevor finally settling down with Sypha and starting a family, but if we refer to the games, we can probably insinuate what went down in Trevor's life after the series ended. Now, if we take a look at the Castlevania games in the main continuity, it is very much possible that Trevor and Sypha get married and have their child, who is probably Frederick Belmont. With Dracula being resurrected by the end of the series, we can assume that Trevor had to face him at some point, but even though the gaming lore never materializes on Dracula's resurrection led by Isaac coming to fruition, we will simply go out on a limb to assume a duel between the two strongest characters in the franchise. With a new spin-off series documenting the adventures of Richter Belmont on Castlevania Nocturne, one thing is for sure that the Belmont clan lives on whilst carrying its rich legacy. Plus, it is revealed that Juste Belmont is Richter's grandfather. In the original timeline, the Belmont family lineage unfolds with Richter as the son of Juste Belmont, who is the grandson of Simon Belmont, the protagonist of a Castlevania game. Simon, in turn, is the great-grandson of Christopher Belmont, though it remains uncertain whether this lineage passes through Soleil or Gerhard Belmont. Now, Christopher, as the son of Frederick Belmont, is also the offspring of Trevor Belmont and Sypha Belnades. Consequently, Richter's placement as the 9th-generation descendant of Trevor perfectly aligns with the time frame of Castlevania Nocturne, thus connecting the events that we did not see on screen and presumably leading to Richter Belmont's adventures in the recently released spin-off series. But if we draw inspiration from the Lords of Shadow continuity, Trevor and Sypha probably had a son named Simon before he went on to face a resurrected Dracula. Given that we already have an Alucard in the picture, Trevor's transformation into another Alucard seems bizarre and bleak. Even if he meets his end while trying to kill the Dark Vampire Lord, there is always another Belmont in line, waiting for revenge and ready with a whip to take down Dracula. Anyways, it should be noted that none of these theories per se are set in stone. They're simply our take on what could have been the scenario if the studio had decided to follow a continuity along Castlevania's timeline. Marvelous verdict. Although Trevor received a cathartically beautiful ending,
and compel the rulers of the realms to invade other realms and merge with them, with its end goal being to have all 6 realms merged into a single world, which in turn would bring about its return to its true form. And sure enough, plenty of conflict ensued between the realms, prompting the Elder Gods to come up with a solution that would help them keep these conflicts in check. The Elder Gods enacted a martial arts elimination tournament that they called Mortal Kombat, that the purpose of which was essentially to regulate invasions and mergers of realms. The concept of Mortal Kombat came with a number of hard and fast rules, chief among them being that if a realm can, through its chosen champion, win 10 tournaments in a row, it would have the right to merge with the losing realm. Mortal Kombat could, however, only be invoked once every 50 years, and if it was invoked, the defending realm would not have the option to refuse it. The creation of the Mortal Kombat tournament surely regulated invasions and mergers, but it did not stop them. One realm in particular that proved to be extraordinarily hungry for war and conquest was Outworld. Initially under the rule of its original rule, known as Onaga, the Dragon King, it grew in power, with Onaga uniting all of Outworld's warring tribes and factions due to the threat of invasion from Netherrealm. Eventually, Onaga was betrayed by his trusted advisor, Shao Kahn, who would go on to poison his master and take control of Outworld for himself.
Always on the right trail.
Under Shao Kahn's rule, Outworld invaded and conquered a number of territories, but its biggest victory would come with the invasion of Edenia. Intending to merge the lush, gleaming realm with Outworld and bring it under his control, Shao Kahn invoked Mortal Kombat, and after winning 10 tournaments in a row in spite of Edenia sending its best champions forward, Outworld merged with the realm and took control of it. In doing so, Shao Kahn killed Edenia's ruler, King Jarrett, took his wife Sindel as his queen, and at her behest adopted their daughter, Kitana, as his own. Kitana would go on to be put through rigorous training, following which she would become Shao Kahn's personal guard and elite assassin. Of course, with Edenia in his grasp, Shao Kahn was now more powerful than ever, and as is often the case with evil supervillains, he was far from satisfied with what he had been able to accomplish. He wanted more than what he already had, more than Edenia. He wanted the jewel of the universe, the realm that he knew would make him and Outworld the undisputed rulers of the universe and make his reign absolute. And so, his attention turned to Earthrealm.
Yeah.
Shao Kahn set plans in motion that would allow him to eventually conquer Earthrealm, which of course would need Outworld to win 10 consecutive Mortal Kombat tournaments against it. For this purpose, Shao Kahn entrusted his advisor, a powerful sorcerer named Shang Tsung, with invoking and winning tournaments against Earthrealm. And though he did go on to win a few tournaments and become crowned champion for each of them, he was unable to put together the streak that Outworld and Shao Kahn needed. That, of course, is because Earth wasn't just going to lie down and not defend itself. Raiden, who had been appointed as the protector of Earthrealm, rallied together the realm's best fighters and formed a secret society known as White Lotus, whose express purpose was to train its fighters and choose champions who would represent and defend the realm in Mortal Kombat tournaments. One such champion was the supremely skilled martial artist known as the Great Kung Lao, who defeated Shang Tsung in one particular tournament and became its champion, successfully defending Earth. The Great Kung Lao showed mercy, however, and decided to let Shang Tsung live, which proved to be a mistake because Shang Tsung would then go on to decide that if he was to fulfill Shao Kahn's wishes and deliver Earthrealm to him, he would need to up his game and string together 10 Mortal Kombat victories as soon as possible. For this purpose, Shang Tsung chose a new champion to fight in his stead, Goro, the prince of a half-human, half-dragon race from the Outworld known as Shokan. Not only did he have 4 arms and also incredible and terrifying strength to match, Goro would go on to kill the Great Kung Lao, and proved so powerful that he was able to string 9 Mortal Kombat victories together. That meant Outworld needed just one more victory to be able to successfully conquer Earthrealm.
Yeah, I see it.
With the fate of Earth hanging in the balance, Raiden, knowing how much was at stake, chose 3 warriors to represent and defend the realm alongside him in the next Mortal Kombat tournament: Shaolin monk and former White Lotus warrior, Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, who is a Hollywood star and a skilled martial artist with a point to prove, and Special Forces agent Sonya Blade, who's on the hunt for a man named Kano, who's part of a criminal mercenary organization known as the Black Dragon. Outworld, meanwhile, would also be represented by 4 warriors. Goro, now hungrier than ever to assert his dominance over all foes and unwilling to stop at anything to win a 10th straight tournament. The aforementioned Kano, harboring secret notions to infiltrate Shang Tsung's palace and steal its vast stockpiles of gold. Scorpion, a skilled assassin of the Shirai Ryu clan of ninjas, and Sub-Zero of the Lin Kuei clan of ninjas, and also an assassin. We're now entering the original Mortal Kombat story, but before we do need to lay some groundwork for those latter 2 characters in particular, Scorpion and Sub-Zero, who, to put it mildly, have massive beef with each other. We'll be going into much greater detail about the long and complicated history of these 2 characters and the origins of their conflict in future parts. But for now, here's what you need to know. The Shirai Ryu and Lin Kuei clans are locked in a furious feud, which ultimately culminated in the complete destruction of the Shirai Ryu clan and the death of Scorpion. Scorpion was eventually brought back to life, and believing that Sub-Zero was responsible for his death and the destruction of his clan, swore vengeance against him. As such, killing Sub-Zero was primarily why Scorpion agreed to fight for Outworld in the tournament, knowing that his rival would be there as well. Sub-Zero, meanwhile, was there because he had been secretly hired by his clan to kill Shang Tsung. Why exactly? Again, we'll get to that in future parts. But yeah, now we've finally arrived at the events of the original Mortal Kombat game, which was released over 3 decades ago in 1992. By this time, Goro has been undefeated for 500 years, and Shang Tsung has the tournament in a tight iron grip, to the point where it's become almost completely corrupted and nearly impossible to win for any opposing Outworld. With the realm needing just 1 tournament victory to bring Earthrealm under its shadow, the forces of Outworld and Earthrealm duke it out in the tournament, and ultimately, Liu Kang was able to defeat all of his foes, including Goro. The Shokan Prince is presumed dead, while newly crowned champion Liu Kang also goes on to challenge and defeat Shang Tsung, who flees to Outworld in defeat. Meanwhile, during the tournament, Scorpion and Sub-Zero also locked horns, and the former is successful in avenging his own death by killing Sub-Zero and sending him to the depths of Netherrealm. That's where we leave things off at the end of the original Mortal Kombat. though there is, of course, a great deal of story to be told.
Yeah.
When we return for part 2, we'll be going over the events of Mortal Kombat 2,
You go for
dive
it,
further
Ricky.
into the story of Scorpion and Sub-Zero,
I'll lead the
and
way.
cover a few more things that will set up the series events that are even further off.
Hey,
In part 1 of our recap of the entire Mortal Kombat series, we dove deep into the franchise's lore and the thousands of years that led up to the first game, before then moving on to talk about the events of the original Mortal Kombat itself, which saw Liu Kang defeating Goro and Shang Tsung in the tournament to protect the
Yeah, I see
Earthrealm
it.
from being invaded and merged by the forces of Outworld and Shao Kahn. In part 2, we're going to talk about the next 2 mainline games in the series, but before we do that, we're going to pause and go back so we can lay the groundwork for the personal arcs of 2 particular characters, Scorpion and Sub-Zero, who are in many ways the faces of the Mortal Kombat franchise.
is fighting for its life.
Both belong to different factions, with Scorpion, aka Hanzo Hasashi, being a member of the Shirai Ryu, a clan of Japanese ninjas,
Just follow my
and
tail.
Sub-Zero, also
Your
known
middle
as
tower is under
Bi-Han,
attack.
being a member
How
of
could
the
you
Lin
let that
Kuei,
happen?
a clan of
Good
Chinese
stuff.
ninjas. These 2 clans, however, have long been embroiled in a fierce rivalry that precedes even that of Scorpion and Sub-Zero, which goes back to the founding of Shirai Ryu, which was created by a man named Takeda,
How
a
could
member
you
of the
let
Lin
that
Kuei, who broke away from the Chinese clan and started his own faction in Japan. This rivalry between the 2 clans goes on to be used as part of the scheming manipulations of a sorcerer named Quan Chi, a man who reports to Shinnok, who was defeated, exiled, and banished thousands of years ago, and has been trapped in Netherrealm ever since. Shinnok tasks Quan Chi with finding and retrieving an ancient amulet, using which he will be able to bend dimensions to his will and break free of Netherrealm. His ultimate goal?
Time
To
to kill
invade
something?
and conquer Earthrealm. In order to get his hands on the amulet, Quan Chi
king.
hires 2 people separately, with neither being aware that either is also involved.
Hey.
He hires both Scorpion and Sub-Zero to retrieve the amulet for him, hoping to have one as insurance in case the other fails in his task. During his missions, Sub-Zero crosses path with Scorpion and kills him. All of this, of course, happens before the events of the original Mortal Kombat, with Scorpion in the game having returned in undead form, driven only by his
Your top
need to
tower is
avenge his
defending
death
itself
and the
bravely.
death of his clan.
This
Speaking
way.
of which, as payment for Sub-Zero upon retrieving the amulet, Quan Chi enables the Lin Kuei to completely decimate the Shirai
It's all on
Ryu,
the way.
which is why when Scorpion does reanimate, he holds Sub-Zero responsible for everything that he's lost. Of course, as we discussed in part 1 of our recap, when Scorpion and Sub-Zero
Your
cross
middle
paths
tower is
again in
fighting
the
for its
tournament,
life.
the tables are turned, and this time it's Scorpion who succeeds in killing his nemesis. But that isn't the end of Bi-Han's story, of
Just
course.
follow my trail.
His soul descends into Netherrealm,
Honestly,
and there
this
he's
battle
encountered
I
by
need to
Shinnok
stop.
himself, who revives him, but not as Sub-Zero, but instead as the shadowy undead wraith who goes by the name Noob Saibot. Under Shinnok's orders
No
and
worries.
corrupted and controlled by his influence, Noob Saibot returns to the other realms, with his orders for now being to observe Shao Kahn and Outworld's conflict against Earthrealm and bide his time until the return of Shinnok. That's all the time we'll be spending on Shinnok for now, but there's a great deal more of him to come in future parts, so keep his name in mind. For now, however, it's back to Shao
His
Kahn and
middle tower has paid
Outworld,
for its
because
ignorance.
even though Shang Tsung failed to win a 10th consecutive Mortal Kombat
Just follow
tournament,
my
in
trail.
his stead, in the first game by the time Mortal Kombat 2 kicks off, the Emperor has a new plan in motion.
Ang meeting, make it Christmas with beefy, saucy, dinamnam ulam, Jollibee Burgers Day. Make it Christmas with Jollibee Burgers Day.
Here's one from my stash.
Upon returning to
That's the
Outworld
one.
after his defeat and begging for mercy in front of Shao Kahn, Shang Tsung advised the Emperor to compel Earthrealm to participate in a false Mortal Kombat tournament hosted in
Pause it.
Outworld, itself as a part of a larger plan. What plan exactly?
I'll lead the
We'll
way.
get back to that later. For now, let's talk about Mortal Kombat 2, which begins with an attack on
Welcome to the Till
Earthrealm
Attack.
led by the terrifying and bloodthirsty Baraka,
Probably the right way.
who is a general of the Takatin Horde and a loyal servant of Shao Kahn. The attack
Just follow
kills
my
several
tail.
Shaolin monks, many of whom were known to Raiden and his close friend and fellow martial artist Kung Lao, not to be confused with the great Kung Lao, who he is in fact descended from. Of course, the attacks also serve as a summons for Earthrealm's warriors to Outworld, where a new Mortal Kombat tournament is being held. And, enraged by their fresh losses, Earth's forces once again head out to participate in the tournament. This time, the forces for both sides are larger than they were in the first game. On the side of Earthrealm, we have a number of familiar faces, including the likes of Raiden, Liu Kang, the defending champion of the Mortal Kombat tournament, and the actor Johnny Cage, who once again joins Liu Kang. Meanwhile, they are also joined by Kung Lao, as well as Major Jackson Briggs, also known as Jax, a U.S. Special Force soldier whose primary purpose of going to Outworld is to find and rescue his partner Sonya Blade, who was captured by Shao Kahn's forces after the events of the first game.
Trying to kill something?
Earthrealm also has a few unexpected allies by its side this time, chief among them being Sub-Zero. This, however, is not the Sub-Zero that you know. Bi-Han is of course currently out there as Noob Saibot. Unbeknownst to everyone else, while in his absence, the mantle of Sub-Zero has been taken up by his younger brother, Kuai Liang, who is also a member of the Lin Kuei clan and believes his brother to be dead. This new Sub-Zero is also joined by fellow assassin and close friend Smoke, and both of them have now been tasked by the Lin Kuei to kill Shang Tsung to fulfill a contract, which Bi-Han, the previous Sub-Zero, was unable to do. With Shang Tsung in their crosshairs, the two of them align themselves with the forces of Earthrealm for the purpose of the tournament in Outworld. And what about Outworld's forces? A number of warriors represent Shao Kahn in the tournament, with the sorcerer Shang Tsung once again being one of them. His personal bodyguard Reptile also participates, while Scorpion, who isn't aware that this new Sub-Zero isn't the one he killed in the events of the first game, is hell-bent on killing his sworn enemy again, which sees him allying with the Outworld. Shao Kahn's forces also include Baraka, Goro's successor Kintaro, as well as Kitana, the adopted daughter of Shao Kahn, who has been under his spell since the invasion of Edenia long ago, as well as Mileena, a clone of Kitana made by Shao Kahn.
Double kill.
A couple of characters who start the game allied with Outworld do end up switching sides, however. One of them, surprisingly enough, is Scorpion, who learns during the tournament that this Sub-Zero is not the man he previously defeated, and is instead an honorable and noble warrior, whose brother he killed. Vowing to protect the new Sub-Zero at all costs, Scorpion joins forces with Earthrealm. Someone else who defects from Outworld's side is Kitana. After Shao Kahn spell on her breaks, she regains her memories of Edenia, of how it was conquered by Outworld, and of her mother Sindel, who was the queen of Edenia, who killed herself not long after the realm was destroyed and merged by Shao Kahn's forces. Kitana and Mileena lock horns after their former defects, and the fight ends with Kitana killing her so-called sister. After that, she's branded a traitor by Shao Kahn, though she manages to escape. During the tournament itself, Jax succeeds in finding and rescuing Sonya while the forces of Earthrealm once again prove victorious. For the second time in a row, it is Liu Kang who's declared champion, after he defeats Shang Tsung, Kintaro, and finally Shao Kahn himself. But though Earthrealm wins the tournament, it turns out that it was a setup by Shao Kahn merely as a distraction, because while their warriors were fighting in the tournament over in Outworld, Shao Kahn was putting the pieces in place to begin a secret invasion of Earthrealm. With the help of Shang Tsung and using ancient magic, Shao Kahn revives Sindel, the former queen of Edenia, bringing her back so that she doesn't have her memories and is instead fully under his influence. However, rather than reviving her on Outworld, he does so on Earthrealm, following which he's able to use her to open a portal to the realm, thus beginning his invasion of Earth. Before we get to the actual invasion though, let's take a diversion and talk about Sub-Zero and Smoke, because the two Lin Kuei assassins are, of course, unsuccessful in their mission to kill Shang Tsung. But not only did they return home empty-handed, after coming back to the clan, things only go from bad to worse for them. Between the events of Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, when Sub-Zero and Smoke return, they find that the Grandmaster of the Lin Kuei has enacted a new policy of sorts. Hoping to create the most lethal and effective warriors for the clan, he has begun the Cyber Initiative, which essentially takes Lin Kuei soldiers and turns them into deadly cyborgs. Some members, like two assassins named Sector and Cyrax, have already been cyberized. But Sub-Zero and Smoke both refuse to go along with the clan's new direction. Both are declared traitors, and though Sub-Zero is able to escape, Smoke is captured and transformed into a cyborg. But Earthrealm at large has much bigger problems to deal with, of course because Shao Kahn's full-scale attack has now begun, which brings us to the events of Mortal Kombat 3, the game that covers the events of Outworld's invasion and Earthrealm's climactic battle against Shao Kahn.
Doble na
Just
ba ang
follow my
pagod mo
tail.
dahil doble ang kayod mo? Baka iba na ang kailangan mo ngayon. Switch to Bear Brand Adult Plus. May doble calcium, B vitamins, and vitamin C para
Yeah.
doble ang tibay. Mag Bear Brand Adult Plus.
Pretty fun. Only the always on my trail. You couldn't stop.
That battle does not begin well for the good guys. Heavy casualties are instantly incurred. Literally billions of souls are lost, and Raiden is able to save and gather only a few survivors, who together form the Earthrealm's resistance against Outworld's overwhelming forces. This includes the likes of Raiden, Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, Jax, and Sonya Blade, while they're also joined by a couple of newcomers. There's Curtis Stryker, a police officer who emerged as one of the only surviving in an entire bustling metropolis after it was decimated by Outworld's forces. Nightwolf, a powerful Native American warrior who received visions of Shao Kahn's invasion before it happened and has decided to fight to defend Earthrealm.
It's how I live.
And Cabal, a mysterious soldier with superhuman speed, who was once a member of the Black Dragon and now lives with a heavily scarred face and needs constant use of a respirator to breathe. Believing that Kano, who of course is also a Black Dragon member, is responsible for his current condition, Cabal is out for revenge. Kano, meanwhile, has sided with the Outworld forces, with his enemies Jax and Sonya still hot on his tail, as they have been for a while.
When's the murder start?
Meanwhile, Sub-Zero has joined Earthrealm's forces, as well as Scorpion, who has of course sworn to
Got any
protect
scrub?
Kuai Liang. Sub-Zero runs into a few hairy situations of his own in Mortal Kombat 3, with the Lin Kuei having programmed the cyberized versions of Cyrax, Sector, and Smoke to hunt down and kill him. However, Smoke eventually is able to get back in touch with his human self, and remembering his friendship with Sub-Zero helps him in fighting and defeating the Lin Kuei cyborgs. Outworld's forces, meanwhile, have plenty of deadly customers for the Earthrealm's warriors to deal with, like Ermac, a mysterious entity devoid of all emotion who is, in a nutshell, an embodiment of combinations of a number of souls who were destroyed in many wars throughout the Outworld's history, only to be brought back and combined together in one singular body, under Shao Kahn's control and command. He's joined by the Shokan Shiva, and Rain, a treacherous former Edenian prince now serving Outworld. Then there's Motaro, a centaur and the head of Shao Kahn's forces, and the responsibility of eliminating Earthrealm's resistance. Meanwhile, Shao Kahn has also sent one of his most highly trained spies and assassins, Jade, to track down and kill Katana, following her betrayal in the previous game. It just so happens, however, that Jade and Katana are lifelong friends, and eventually the two of them, with Rain by their side, join forces with Earthrealm in its attempts to drive out Outworld. Ultimately, against all odds, the forces of Earthrealm are proven victorious once again. Liu Kang and Shao Kahn once again lock horns in a furious battle, which ends with the former emerging victorious once again. In defeat, a severely wounded and weakened Shao Kahn retreats, and with the forces of Outworld driven out, Earthrealm is saved at last. Shao Kahn's defeat also results in the realm of Edenia being freed of Outworld's control after thousands of years in subjugation, while his influence on the revived Sindel also breaks. With her memories restored, she retakes her place as the queen of the now revived Edenia. And that's where Mortal Kombat 3 ends, with Shao Kahn's defeated once again and for all. Well, for now anyway. And Outworld's plan to merge Earthrealms failing after literally centuries of attempts. But of course, Earthrealm's problems are far from over, because though Shao Kahn is defeated, another terrifying force is about to rise again. Remember Shinnok, who was trapped in Netherrealm and has been biding his time for who knows how long to return to the forefront and destroy Earthrealm? Yeah, he's gonna be back soon, and he's not exactly the most cheerful guy. But that's where we're going to leave things for now. When we return with part 3 of the Mortal Kombat series recap, we'll be covering the events of Mortal Kombat 4 and Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance.
So far, in our recap of the entire Mortal Kombat franchise, across the first 2 parts, we've covered the original trilogy, which culminates with Shao Kahn and his forces of Outworld invading Earthrealm, only to be driven back and defeated by Liu Kang, Raiden, and company. Here in part 3, we're going to move ahead to the next phase of the franchise, which kicks off a new arc and introduces a new main villain for the heroes to contend with. After the defeat of Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat 3, MK4 turns its attention to a new central threat in Shinnok. But before we get into the events of the game itself, we first need to turn the clock back a little bit and talk about Shinnok himself, and about how he got to the point where we find him in Mortal Kombat 4. In terms of pure status, especially on paper, Shinnok is a bigger threat than Shao Kahn ever was.
Yeah, I see
Despite the
it.
latter being a bloodthirsty, warmongering, tyrannical ruler who conquered and merged
Just
many
follow my
realms.
tail.
Even back when the realms were still relatively young, Shinnok had his eyes set on Earthrealm. Wanting to be his ruler, but knowing that he would face heavy opposition, he set out in secret to devise ways that would help him invade and conquer the realm without breaking the rules. From those machinations emerged Shinnok's amulet, which would allow him to weaken the barriers between dimensions and successfully enter Earthrealm. It was this same amulet that Shinnok's servant, the sorcerer Quan Chi, hired Sub-Zero and Scorpion to retrieve in Mortal Kombat mythology Sub-Zero, which Quan Chi ultimately succeeded in, only to hand a replica of the amulet to his master at the end, keeping the original for himself in secret. We'll get back to that in a while though. For now, let's stay focused on the story at hand, which happened millions of years ago. With his newly created amulet, Shinnok invaded Earthrealm, sparking a war against the realm and its defenders. During this war,
there's a
Shinnok's
cracker
primary
in it. Looks
opponent
like
was
this
Raiden,
survived.
the appointed protector of Earthrealm. With both sides incurring heavy losses, Earthrealm, for instance, saw the extinction
Right on.
of its dominant
Keep at it.
indigenous species, the Saurians, with the Dino people being almost completely wiped out by Shinnok and his forces. Millions of years later, during the present Mortal Kombat storyline, Reptile is the last surviving individual of this species. Even so, though the Saurians were wiped out, Raiden was able to defeat Shinnok. In the aftermath, Shinnok was banished to and imprisoned in the deepest depths of Netherrealm, on top of which he was also stripped of
You
his
couldn't
amulet,
stop
which
me.
again would go on to be stolen back by Quan Chi in the very distant future.
No worries.
Seething with rage and the humiliation of defeat, Shinnok vowed to one day return and finish what he started
What do you
with the
reckon?
invasion of Earthrealm and completely conquer it. He bided his time for an interminably long period.
Maelstrom.
In Netherrealm, he was tortured for a long time, but
always
eventually
on my
was able to
trail.
find a loyal servant in Quan Chi.
throw some
Seeing the value in a sorcerer who could travel between realms without restrictions, Shinnok enlisted the aid of Quan Chi, and with his help, enlisted
One in the
himself
groove.
as the ruler of Netherrealm. Later, during the events of the first 3 Mortal Kombat games,
Rick,
he began
I did
moving
it.
some
Trick.
pieces, manipulating things behind
Yeah.
the scenes, in preparation for his return, like sending Quan Chi to retrieve his amulet,
Scumbags.
or reviving Bihan, the former Sub-Zero, as Noob Saibot, and sending him back into the world of the living to serve as his silent
Oh,
spy. Or even paving the way for Shao Kahn's invasion of Earthrealm by helping him revive Queen Sindel's soul and use it to open a portal to Earthrealm to kick off his invasion. It was only after the defeat of Shao Kahn and Outworld in Mortal Kombat 3 that Shinnok
Yeah.
decided that it was finally time for him to break free from his permanent banishment in Netherrealm, a realm he now ruled, and kick his ages-long plan for utter domination into gear once again. And thus we arrive at Mortal Kombat 4, which begins with an invasion not of Earthrealm, but of Edenia, because that's the realm that all the big bads of this franchise seem to want to focus on first and foremost, unfortunately for its people. With the help of Edenian traitor Tanya, Shinnok invades Edenia and conquers the realm, also kidnapping Katana and Queen Sindel in the process. And from there, he turns his attention to another realm where he has plenty of sworn enemies. Shinnok's assault proves to be a devastating one. The two who manage to survive the ambush and successfully escape are Raiden and Fujin. The latter also made an appearance in Mortal Kombat mythologies and was one of those who protected Shinnok's amulet and was defeated by Sub-Zero. Raiden and Fujin escape to Earthrealm, where Shinnok has now fully turned his focus. Bracing themselves for an imminent invasion from Netherrealm, Raiden and Fujin gather the forces of Earthrealm once again, with the likes of Liu Kang, Sub-Zero, Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, Jax Briggs, and newcomer Kai, a martial artist, coming together to defend their home against this threat. Mortal Kombat 4 has a stacked cast of characters where the bad guys are concerned too, on top of central antagonists like Quan Chi and Shinnok himself. The game also features a number of returning baddies like Goro, the undead noob Saibot, who is still serving Shinnok, and Reptile, who allies himself with Shinnok in hopes that he'll revive his
something
nearly
really
extinct
cool?
race. They are, as you would expect, also joined by several newcomers,
Any blood
including an
trails?
assassin from Outworld who serves as the general of Shinnok's army, the previously mentioned Tanya,
Always a
the
sneaky
Adenian
hint.
traitor, and Jarek, who's believed to be the last surviving member of the Black Dragon,
Now
with Kano being believed dead at this point. Kano's apparent death, emphasis on apparent, at the hand of Jack Briggs was shown in the spin-off titled Mortal Kombat Special Forces, which, incidentally, was also the game where
Bad
Jarek
intel?
made his debut. Special Forces
Ripper.
ended with Jax almost completely wiping out the Black Dragon, including killing Kano, but
I'm
not
game.
really. But though Jarek was defeated as well, he managed to narrowly escape, following which he is allied with
This way
Shinnok
looks
in Mortal
clear.
Kombat 4. Several other characters were also added to the MK4 roster, with the expanded
If
re-release,
someone
Mortal
asked me
Kombat
if I'm
Gold,
God,
which
I'll
brought
say
the
yes.
likes of Cyrax, who was restored back to his human
What
form,
talent? Train.
Kung Lao, Kitana, Melina, Sector, who was a hidden character, and Baraka into the fold once again.
Here's a hint.
Scorpion returns in Mortal Kombat 4 as well, though his story takes a bit of an unexpected turn. Once again, twisted by the manipulations of Quan Chi, Scorpion is led into believing that Sub-Zero, the current Sub-Zero, did indeed have a hand in the destruction of the Shirai Ryu clan. Of course, Scorpion is aware that this Sub-Zero is not
One in the
Bihan,
groove.
his sworn enemy,
Nothing
whom
to
he
it.
already killed in the original Mortal Kombat game. Following that, Bihan was revived
Just
by
follow my
Shinnok
trail.
as Noob Saibot, while his younger brother, Kuai Liang, took up his mantle as the
Yeah, I
new
see it.
Sub-Zero. As we discussed in part 2 of our series recap, when Scorpion learned
You smell
about
something?
this and saw that the new Sub-Zero was an honorable warrior whose brother he had killed, he swore to protect him, just as he had once sworn to kill his
time.
older brother. In spite of that vow, however, Quan Chi manages to pull Scorpion's strings in Mortal Kombat 4 to once again pit him against Sub-Zero. The two clash in Goro's lair, and Scorpion is on the verge of
Always on
victory
my
and
trail.
dealing a killing blow, only for Sub-Zero
been
somehow
patient.
finding a way to convince him in
Probably
the
the
nick of
right
time that he had nothing to do with the death of his family and clan. Quan Chi arrives on the scene at
That's
this
the
point,
one.
and believing that his foes are soon going to be dead thanks to Shinnok anyway, reveals to Scorpion at long last
This way.
that it was him who orchestrated the destruction of the Shirai Ryu at the hands of the Lin Kuei.
Always
Scorpion,
a sneaky
finally
hint.
knowing the full truth of the situation
Just
and
treat-
determined to avenge his clan's death, turns
I'll
his
lead the
attention
way.
on Quan Chi. The sorcerer attempts to flee, but Scorpion's rage knows no
Where's
bounds,
the murder
and he
stack?
chases him all the way to Netherrealm. We're going to leave it there for now, but we'll be
No, this
returning to
way. No,
Scorpion
I'm
and
the
Quan Chi in just a bit, so keep this stuff in mind. For the time being, let's go back to Earthrealm and its fight against Shinnok and his
No
forces.
worries.
Well, actually, there isn't much more to talk about here because we're basically wrapping things up on Mortal Kombat 4. The forces of Earthrealm managed to defeat Shinnok and drive his minions back. Shinnok is banished to Netherrealm for a second time, with Liu Kang emerging as Earthrealm's defender once again, as the one to finally defeat Shinnok in combat. At the end, Earthrealm and Edenia are both freed, while by this point, well before this point in fact, Earthrealm has also established the Outer World Investigation Agency, formed as an arm of the U.S. Special Forces, under the leadership of Sonya and Jax. OIA's primary purpose is to protect Earth against interdimensional threats, of which there's obviously no shortage in the Mortal Kombat universe.
Double kill.
OIA also counts among its members Cyrax, after he has been rescued from his cyberized form and restored to humanity by Sonya and Jax, of course, and Kenshi, a blind warrior who's on the hunt
Here we
for
go
Shang
again.
Tsung as part of his personal quest for revenge.
What?
Another
Yes,
crucial
okay.
tidbit that we need to touch on before we move on from Mortal Kombat 4. After the defeat of Shinnok,
Yep.
Raiden appoints Fujin to replace him as the new protector of Earthrealm. And from here, we come to Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, the fifth mainline game in the franchise, and return to Scorpion and Quan Chi's battle, which, interestingly enough, is where the game begins. In Goro's lair, after revealing to Scorpion that it was him who orchestrated the destruction of his clan, Quan Chi banishes him to Netherrealm, but Scorpion, driven by pure fury, drags the sorcerer down with him. When they arrive in
Anyone know where
Netherrealm,
we're
Quan
going?
Chi attempts to flee with Scorpion giving chase
It's what
and
I
using
do.
Shinnok's amulet, which, as we mentioned previously, he had secretly kept for himself after giving his master a fate. Quan Chi manages to open up a portal and escape. He arrives in Outworld, where he finds himself in a mysterious massive crypt, and makes a startling discovery. He finds the mummified remains of a massive army, which he finds out is the long-dead army of Outworld's former ruler, the terrifying Onaga, better known as the Dragon King. As
Time to
we
kill
covered in
something?
part 1 of our series
take this
recap, Onaga was poisoned and killed by his most trusted lieutenant Shao Kahn, who would go on to replace him as the Emperor of Outworld.
keen.
Quan Chi, whose sights are ever sight high, realizes that he can use this army to rule the realms and defeat his enemies.
Always was
And he
a
goes to
bright
fellow
spot.
sorcerer Shang Tsung with his proposal. He tells him that he
all
will
on the
provide him
line.
with an endless supply of souls if Shang Tsung can transport some of the
keen.
souls of fallen warriors into the mummies of the
can
Dragon
make a little
King's
pool.
armies to revive them in full. And thus the titular deadly alliance between Quan Chi and Shang Tsung is formed. Together, the two create the supernatural
You couldn't
phenomenon
stop
known
me.
as a Soulnado, which accomplishes both objectives at once, both
Got me
reviving
scrawled.
Onaga's army and supplying Shang Tsung with an endless supply of souls to
it.
consume. Consuming these souls, of course, also results in a gargantuan increase in his powers, as well as a significant reversal of his aging and physical condition.
Yep.
With an army now under their control, Quan Chi and Shang Tsung identify two key threats
follow my tail.
that they will need to take out of the equation so they don't throw a wrench in their plans. The first is Liu Kang, Earthrealm's greatest warrior, and the
It's
second
how I
is Shao
live.
Kahn, the Emperor of Outworld. Shao Kahn, who has been struck with paranoia
Yeah.
ever since the humiliation of his defeat against Earthrealm. They are successful in killing Liu
Now
Kang,
you see.
snapping his neck and consuming his soul, while they also kill Shao Kahn, though unbeknownst to them,
Rattle the
the one
dogs.
they've killed is really just a clone, with the real Shao Kahn still out there. That, however, is something that's only revealed in the next game, Mortal Kombat
follow
Deception.
my trail.
So let's file that away for now. And thus the Deadly Alliance's assault on Earthrealm begins. Raiden, who served as the realm's protector for countless millions of years, is obviously none too pleased about this and urges the Elder Gods to intervene
I'll
and
lead the
stop
way.
the Deadly Alliance and the Dragon King's revived army. They, however, very rarely intervene in the conflicts between realms, and once again, they refuse to do so. Disgusted by their inaction, Raiden arrives at Earth in hopes of helping it fight back against its would-be invaders. Once again, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance features a stacked cast of characters on both sides of the conflict, featuring plenty of familiar faces and newcomers alike. Where the latter are concerned, one of Deadly Alliance's more important introductions, at least as far as the game's story is concerned, is Su Hao, a longtime member of the Special Forces and OIA who is actually an undercover agent of the Red Dragon, on the orders of Mavado, one of the highest-ranking Red Dragon members. As part of the group's long-standing enmity with the Black Dragon, Su Hao uses a nuclear warhead to destroy the OIA's portal, preventing its
see it.
agents from being able to travel
not
across
sure this isn't
dimensions.
killing
That,
me.
as you might expect, has
That's the one.
significant consequences in Earthrealm's conflict against Quan Chi and Shang Tsung. Other key new introductions in Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance include the
all on
likes
the
of
way.
previously mentioned Kenshi, Draman, a Netherrealm Oni who was abandoned and left in the realm by his former ally Quan Chi, and is now out for revenge. Draman's ally Moloch, Nitara, a vampire who is seeking to free her realm, return us from the clutches of Outworld after years of subjugation. Li Mei, a native of Outworld whose people have been enslaved by the Deadly Alliance and its conquest, fellow Outworld
murder
native,
stack.
and Bo Rai Cho, a former ally of Liu Kang. There's also Blaze,
This way
who's a
looks
secret
clear.
character. Of course, the game's
Tournament
roster
time.
features plenty of returning characters as well. There's Kung Lao, who has vowed to avenge the death of his friend Liu Kang, Scorpion, who returns from Netherrealm and continues his hunt for Quan Chi, Jax, who has a score to settle with Su Hao, whom he views as a traitor, and Sonya, who returns as well. Cyrax, who along with Kenshi is abandoned on Outworld, thanks to the OIA's portal having been destroyed, and Kano, who, to no one's surprise, is not dead after all. Returning characters include Johnny Cage, Katana, Reptile, and Sub-Zero. By this point, Sub-Zero has revived the Lin Kuei, and now serves as the Order's Grand Master. He's also taken under his wing a student in Frost, another newcomer. Though a fierce and capable warrior, she's also arrogant and displays a consistent lack of humility. Being his protege, Sub-Zero tries to teach her all he can while trying to make sure she sticks to the right path. But Frost, having designs on becoming the Grand Master of the Lin Kuei, eventually comes into conflict with her master. Their confrontation ends with Frost's defeat and apparent death, though Sub-Zero forgives her for her actions in the aftermath and lays her body to rest in a sarcophagus. Back to the story at hand. Earthrealm's defense against the Deadly Alliance doesn't go too well. It goes horribly, in fact, with a number of crucial characters dying in the battle against Quan Chi, Shang Tsung, and the revived army of the Dragon King, which they control, which, in turn, is thanks to their possession of Shinnok's amulet and the powers it holds. These casualties include the likes of Kitana, Sonya, Jax, Johnny Cage, and Kung Lao. Raiden is the only one who survives, and though he does try to fight against Quan Chi and Shang Tsung, the sorcerers are able to defeat him. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance ends on this dour note, and this is where we're going to end Part 3 of our Mortal Kombat series recap as well. When we return for Part 4, we'll talk about the events of the next 2 games in the series, Mortal Kombat Deception and Mortal Kombat Armageddon, with the concluding events of the latter also setting the stage for the series' first reboot and timeline reset. In Part 3 of our recap of the entire Mortal Kombat series, we left things off with the climax of the 5th mainline installment, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, which ends with nearly all of the heroes of the franchise meeting grisly fates when they're killed at the hands of Shang Tsung, and Quan Chi with Raiden left as the only one still standing and fighting against them. The next game in the series, Mortal Kombat Deception, picks up pretty much exactly where its predecessor ends. But before we dive back into the story at hand, it's important to first turn back the clock and set up some other important information that will come into play going forward. One character in particular that proves to be central to Mortal Kombat Deception's story, Shujinko, whose story actually begins long before the events of the series proper. Decades ago, in fact, while Shao Kahn's rule was thriving and at the peak of its powers at this point in time, the former Outworld Emperor Dragon King Onaga was seething in his centuries-long imprisonment of death, orchestrated by the treachery of Shao Kahn, who turned on him and killing him. Driven by vengeance and his lingering ambitions of conquest, Onaga started putting his plans in place, hoping to one day return to the world of the living by assimilating what was left of his soul with the physical form of someone else, and taking control of their body. After that, he meant to continue his conquest of all the realms and reshape them as he saw fit. And to do that, he knew he would need the power of something known as the Kamidogu Relics. As we covered in Part 1 of our series recap, they were 6 relics, ancient and all-powerful weapons. The relics were then scattered throughout the realms, but being fully aware of their power to make and unmake reality itself, Onaga knew that if he could get his hands on all of them together, he would be able to reshape all the realms in his own image. And so he set his eyes on the aforementioned Shujinko, who, at this point, was a young and promising warrior on Earthrealm. Appearing to Shujinko as Damashi, Onaga tricked the warrior into carrying out his mission for him. Onaga told him to find and gather the 6 relics and bring them to the Nexus, a unique realm that existed between realms, and said that this would allow the champion to be able to travel between realms more easily. In exchange, Onaga gave Shujinko the ability to absorb the knowledge and fighting skills of whomever he wished, and with this gift, Shujinko set off on his quest. But traveling to 6 different realms and tracking down the ancient, powerful relics took quite some time, as you would imagine. Decades passed, and around the same time that Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance's events were taking place, and Shang Tsung and Quan Chi had managed to revive the Dragon King's undead mummified army, Shujinko finally completed his mission. After getting his hands on the 6th and final relic in Edenia, he traveled to the Nexus, though it wouldn't be long before he would realize just what he had unwittingly been involved in and made possible almost single-handedly, because this was where Onaga returned. Before we get to that, however, let's pause and go back once again, this time all the way back to when Onaga was still the ruler of Outworld, and Shao Kahn was still his loyal servant. At this time, with his roaring empire at the peak of its powers, Onaga devised a plan that would allow him to effectively become immortal. Using the powerful magic of his followers, Onaga cast a spell on a dragon egg, and not just any dragon egg, but the egg of a dragon from the very first generation of the species. And what exactly did the spell do? Well, it essentially transferred his soul into the embryo inside the egg, so that Onaga would be reborn in the body of an elder dragon when the egg hatched millions of years later. The long time afterward, during the events of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, due to a tangled web of events, it just so happened that when the egg hatched, the ever so unfortunate reptile was there. Onaga grabbed this opportunity with both hands and assimilated his tiny dragon body with that of reptile. thus being fully reborn in full physical form, ready to be able to step out into the world again and resume his bloody conquest. And so it was that when Shujinko brought all 6 relics together at the Nexus, Onaga arrived at the scene and revealed to him the true nature of his decades-long quest, and how he had been manipulated into helping the Dragon King come achieve his goals. Taking all 6 relics for himself, Onaga declared that all he needed now was the power contained within Shinnok's amulet, which is in Quan Chi's possession at this point in time, and that using its powers in conjunction with the powers of the relics would finally allow him to take control of and reshape all of the realms however he saw fit. Feeling betrayed and horrified at what he had unwittingly been involved in for most of his life, Shujinko escaped, traveling back to Earthrealm, vowing to defeat Onaga. And now we finally arrive at the events of Mortal Kombat Deception, which, as you may have guessed, sees the Dragon King starring as the main villain. But what of Quan Chi and Shang Tsung, may you ask? Especially after all the havoc their deadly alliance unleashed on all of the realms and their inhabitants. Well, let's get to that, shall we? As MK Deception kicks off, Raiden stands alone against Quan Chi and Shang Tsung, who have killed almost all of those who have stood against them. But even though they are victorious, that victory proves to be short-lived. Almost instantly, the two of them turn on each other and start fighting over the ownership of Shinnok's amulet, since whoever has the amulet has the ability to control the Dragon King's revived army. In the fight that follows, Quan Chi emerges as the victor, but almost as if on cue, Onaga arrives on the scene. Momentarily, Quan Chi, Shang Tsung, and Raiden forget all of the enmity they have between each other, and realizing that Onaga is a far bigger threat, they band together to fight against him. All of their efforts prove useless, however, and it's not long before they realize that the Dragon King is too powerful for all of them, even with all of their powers combined. In a desperate last-ditch attempt to destroy Onaga, at this point, Raiden summons every last shred of his powers and releases them in a single nuclear-level explosion. As you might imagine, that destroys everything in the vicinity and kills Raiden himself, Quan Chi, and Shang Tsung. Onaga, however, emerges unscathed, and now also holds Shinnok's amulet in his possession. Meanwhile, though Raiden has very much disintegrated, he isn't completely dead. His lingering essence finds its way back to Earthrealm, where it's able to regather and revive him, though not without some drastic changes. Corrupted by his encounter with the Dragon King and tainted by his evil magic, Raiden is revived as Dark Raiden, which is exactly what it sounds like. A darker, more ruthless version of Raiden, who has now quickly come to despise the inhabitants of Earthrealm, how they take his protection for granted, and how little they do to protect their own realm. In his new form, Raiden now swears to protect Earthrealm by any means necessary, even if he has to do it against people he once considered his allies, regardless of who he has to kill and how many people he has to kill. To aid him in his efforts, Raiden also revives Liu Kang, though he too comes back not exactly himself. The Liu Kang that returns is no longer the noble warrior he was in life, but a mindless undead servant bound to Raiden's will. Ultimately, however, it's Shujinko, not Raiden or Liu Kang, who turns out to be the one to defeat the Dragon King. While Onaga was rallying his supporters on Outworld and searches for a way that would allow him to fuse all 6 relics together, Shujinko was working towards his own goals as well. In his final fight against Onaga, he uses the very powers that the Dragon King had once granted to him, absorbing the combined fighting powers of a number of warriors, many of whom were new introductions in Mortal Kombat Deception, including Kira and Cobra, who are new Black Dragon recruits, Darius, a resistance leader who's fighting against Onaga's forces, and Dairu, a mercenary from Order Realm, which is where Darius is from as well. Absorbing all of their powers, Shujinko's own abilities expand massively, more than even the Dragon King himself could have anticipated. And with these abilities at his disposal, Shujinko shatters all 6 relics. And since the relics were what made Onaga invincible, that leaves him vulnerable as well. Shujinko strikes a final blow, which quite literally blows Onaga's soul out of Reptile's body, freeing the Saurian from his control. Meanwhile, the Dragon King's soul winds up in Netherrealm, where it is sealed once again, this time by Nightwolf. That wraps up the story of Mortal Kombat Deception and brings us to the events of its successor, Mortal Kombat Armageddon, which is also the final game in the series' original timeline. Before we get to its story, however, we need to jump back in time again. This time we turn our attention to the realm of Edenia, and a couple of key characters in particular. Argus from Edenia, his wife, the sorceress Delia, and their sons, Taven and Dagon. Of particular interest to us here is Delia, who, thanks to the power of foresight, was able to see with absolute certainty something that had a very real chance of coming to pass in the distant future. Sometime after Onaga was originally betrayed and poisoned by Shao Kahn, Delia had a vision of a distant apocalyptic event, Armageddon itself, which she predicted would happen due to the combatants of all the realms becoming so powerful that they would eventually tear the fabric of reality apart. As a way to prevent this cataclysm of all the realms and everything in them, Delia and Argus came up with a plan. Delia foresaw that the fateful final battle at the end of everything would take place in a crater on Edenia. So, at this very spot, Argus built a massive underground pyramid within which he and Delia stored the blaze, a slumbering fire elemental created by the sorceress who would have unimaginable power and would be the means to prevent Armageddon. Elsewhere, however, Delia and Argus disagreed on how best to deal with the warriors in the future who would threaten all of existence. Delia, knowing that many of them would be good people with noble intentions, wanted to take a lenient approach and essentially strip every single one of the combatants of all of their powers. Argus, on the other hand, wanted to take no risks and thought simply wiping them out of existence in one fell swoop would be the best way forward. Ultimately, the husband and wife decided that they would let their children decide. And how exactly would that work? Taven and Dagon were both put into a deep slumber, to be awoken only when the time for Armageddon was finally at hand. Upon being awakened, both brothers would be tasked with defeating Blaze, and the one to claim victory would become Edenia's new protector. In addition to that, both also had to retrieve a special sword and piece of armor, each, with one of them belonging originally to Argus and Delia. If the brother with Delia's equipment defeated Blaze, all of the realm's combatants would be stripped of their powers in order to prevent the destruction of everything, but would still be allowed to keep their lives. However, if one with Argus's gear did the same, all of the combatants would be killed. Both Taven and Dagon were to be woken via a signal from Blaze when Armageddon was at hand. However, Dagon was accidentally woken up much earlier than that, at which point Shinnok was able to manipulate him and turn him to the dark side, so to speak, by identifying Dagon's resentment and jealousy towards his brother as one of his weaknesses. Dagon was then guided into stealing the powerful weapons of his parents and using them to kill Argus and Delia. When Taven would be awoken a long time afterward, at the correct time, unlike his brother, Dagon would be too far gone, and had become completely obsessed with killing Blaze so he could take his power for himself. And now finally we arrive at the events of Mortal Kombat Armageddon itself. In the wake of the events of the previous game, some pretty formidable villains have now lost against the series' heroes, from Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn to Quan Chi and Onaga. However, in MK Armageddon, all of them are brought together under a single banner by Shinnok, with all of them becoming aware of the fact that whoever defeats Blaze will also be granted the Elemental's powers. The villains combine to make the forces of darkness, all working towards a common selfish goal, and are also joined by many other characters from throughout the series, including Scorpion, Dagon, Baraka, Kintaro, Frost, Rain, Kano, Goro, Darius, Melina, Reptile, Sector, and many others. The forces of darkness are not unchallenged in their efforts, of course, and to stand against them, the forces of light emerge as well, with their goal being to defeat Blaze and then use his powers for the betterment of all realms, rather than serving selfish and chaotic purposes. The forces of light also include heroes from throughout the Mortal Kombat series, including Liu Kang, Raiden, Johnny Cage, Jax, Sonya, Sub-Zero, Katana, Cyrax, Nightwolf, Shujinko, Taven, and many more. True to what Delia saw in her visions long ago, the final battle of Armageddon does indeed end up taking place in the Edenian crater, where the forces of darkness and light clash against each other in an epic battle. A duel between Taven and Dagon happens at the base of the pyramid atop which Blaze rests, and Taven ultimately emerges victorious, which of course means that according to what his parents had planned, he is now destined to climb the pyramid, defeat Blaze, and claim his powers. All combatants on both sides of the conflict start climbing up the pyramid, hoping to be the first to reach the top and claim Blaze's powers. But as fate would have it, the victor isn't anyone Delia and Argus could have predicted all that time ago. Dagon has already been defeated, but Taven doesn't defeat Blaze either. In the end, it's Shao Kahn, the Mortal Kombat franchise's oldest and probably most popular main villain, who claims that prize. With the victory he claims, Shao Kahn wreaks absolute havoc, killing pretty much everybody. All warriors in the forces of darkness and light are killed, and the last one left standing is, once again, Raiden. He's only able to do one seemingly small thing before he too is killed, though that seemingly minuscule action changes the course of, well, everything. Using an amulet, Raiden sends a message back into time, to a past version of his own self. The message simply says, he must win. Mortal Kombat Armageddon's story ends with Shao Kahn's ultimate victory, the death of pretty much every other character in the entire series, and the fulfillment of all of Delia's visions of the apocalypse. Where does the story go from here? What purpose does Raiden's message serve? How is there any coming back from any of this? The franchise answers all of those questions with one very simple word: reboot. But we'll talk more about that when we return for part 5 of our complete Mortal Kombat recap, where we'll discuss the events of the series' 9th mainline installment, 2011's Mortal Kombat, which reboots the franchise and starts its own continuity.
In part 4 of our full recap of the Mortal Kombat franchise, we covered the events of Mortal Kombat Deception and Mortal Kombat Armageddon, which of course means that we've arrived at the end of the series' original timeline. Here, we're going to turn our attention to the 9th mainline game in the series, 2011's Mortal Kombat, which rebooted the franchise and created a new timeline, which